The morning sun rose slowly over the northern plains of Virelia, casting a golden hue across the jagged cliffs and scattered rock formations. Zyra had spent the night in the shadows of a high ridge, keeping watch on the human she had observed the previous day. She did not sleep deeply, as she never did. Her mind was sharp, her senses alert, always anticipating danger, yet she found herself thinking about him, Captain Elias. The thought surprised her. She had never cared much for outsiders, and yet something about this human unsettled her. It was not fear, she reminded herself of that, but a strange curiosity, coupled with a growing sense of caution. He had moved with intelligence and calm, and that confidence had left an impression on her. By midday, Zyra saw him again, emerging from the canyon below. He was alone this time, carrying a small pack and moving deliberately across the rocky terrain. He did not seem to notice her watching. He paused now and then, studying the ground, touching strange markings, examining small plants as if every detail held a secret. Zyra narrowed her eyes. His behavior was unusual for an intruder. Most would rush, hide, or panic when in foreign territory. But Elias, he was neither reckless nor afraid. He moved with purpose, a sense of calm determination that was almost unnatural. Curiosity got the better of her. Zyra decided to follow him, not too close but close enough to observe. Her steps were silent, her shadow blending with the rocky slopes. She could have taken him down in an instant. That thought passed through her mind with ease, yet she did not act. Instead, she wanted to understand him. Hours passed as she trailed him. Elias faced obstacles that would have slowed or stopped most beings. He crossed a shallow river by testing each stepping stone carefully. He navigated steep slopes by feeling the texture of the rocks with his hands. And when a Rathrak soared overhead, a predator known for snatching creatures in an instant, Elias did not panic. He ducked behind a large boulder, remaining silent, and waited for the creature to pass. Zyra's lips tightened. The human was clever, undeniably so. She had never encountered a creature, Virilian or otherwise, that reacted to danger with such precision. His calm under pressure was remarkable, and she felt a small, uncomfortable sensation she could not name. As the sun reached its zenith, Elias paused near a cluster of jagged rocks. He placed his pack on the ground and began examining a small device, a tool Zyra had never seen before. It emitted a faint glow and projected a holographic map into the air. Elias tapped on the map, tracing lines with his fingers, muttering quietly to himself in a language Zyra only partially understood. She studied him silently. He was small compared to her, yes, but there was strength in his mind and his actions that made him unpredictable. This was a new kind of challenge, one she could not simply overpower with force. Zyra finally stepped forward, emerging from the shadow of the rocks. Her armor caught the sunlight, glinting sharply. Elias looked up immediately, not startled, not afraid. His eyes met hers, steady and unflinching. "You are persistent," Zyra said, her voice calm but commanding. "I could have ended this before you even noticed me." Elias smiled faintly. "I've been aware of you," he said. "I didn't approach because I wanted to understand, not because I feared." Zyra raised an eyebrow. "Understand? You are a human. What could you possibly understand here?" "I understand that rushing into a new world without observing can be dangerous," Elias replied. "I also understand that strength is not always what it seems. Sometimes intelligence and patience matter more than force." Zyra tilted her head, studying him. His words were bold, almost arrogant, but there was truth in them. She had always believed that strength and courage came from power and skill in battle. Yet this human suggested otherwise. Could a being so small, so seemingly fragile, truly challenge her understanding? Before she could respond, a sudden movement caught her attention. From a nearby ridge, a pack of wild predators, creatures resembling wolves but with scales and razor-sharp claws, emerged. They had clearly noticed the human and moved toward him fast and silent. Elias did not panic. He looked at Zyra briefly, then scanned the terrain for an advantage. Without hesitation, he picked up a rock and threw it to a distant ridge, drawing the predators' attention. They hesitated, distracted by the movement. Elias quickly climbed a small incline and leaped to a higher rock, putting himself out of reach. Zyra watched in fascination. The human's actions were not reckless. Each step was calculated, designed to outsmart the predators rather than fight them head-on. Most creatures, even her own warriors, would have charged in blindly. But Elias moved with strategy, with foresight, and without fear. The predators growled and hissed but did not attack further. Elias lowered himself to the ground, pulling out another small device. A faint pulse of light emitted from it, sending the creatures scattering. The human had no weapon strong enough to physically harm the beasts, yet he found a way to neutralize the threat. Zira's mind raced. She had fought countless enemies, but she had never seen courage like this, intelligence and fearlessness combined. It was a form of bravery she could not easily measure. And for the first time, she felt a flicker of something she had never acknowledged before: uncertainty. As the creatures retreated into the distance, Elias turned to her, unafraid. "You could have joined them," he said lightly. "But I see you prefer to watch." "I observe," Zira replied, her tone clipped but thoughtful. "Observation is useful. You human are unlike any intruder I have encountered," Elias chuckled softly. "And you, warrior, are unlike any guide I have met. Most would attack immediately, but you are studying me." "That is wise." For a moment neither spoke. The wind moved through the rocks, carrying dust and the scent of distant water. Zira studied him again, her mind analyzing every movement, every gesture. She realized that Elias's courage did not come from strength alone. It came from understanding, creativity, and calmness under pressure. Hours passed as they moved together across the plains. Zira at a careful distance, Elias moving with deliberate steps. They navigated rough terrain, crossed shallow rivers, and avoided dangerous predators. Zira observed him, noting how he calculated every risk, how he remained steady even when a small misstep could have led to disaster. By evening, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley that glowed softly in the fading sunlight. Zira paused, her hand resting lightly on her blade. "You are skilled, human," she said. "I have fought many, but none have moved like you." "You survive differently," Elias smiled. "I survive differently because I must. My people are not as strong as yours, but we learn to adapt, to think, and to find solutions where brute force fails." Zira nodded slowly. She had always measured others by strength and combat ability. But this human had shown her a new way, one that did not require overwhelming power, yet was just as effective, just as dangerous in its own way. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Zira finally spoke quietly, almost to herself. "Perhaps courage is not only in fearlessness of danger, perhaps it is in facing it with clarity and thought." Elias glanced at her, noticing the rare softness in her voice. "Courage comes in many forms," he said. "Sometimes it is measured not by what you fight, but by how you think and how you act." Zira did not answer immediately. She had faced countless battles, had led her people through centuries of conflict, yet this human challenged her understanding of everything she had believed. He had entered her territory, and instead of destroying him, she found herself observing, analyzing, and even admiring. The night deepened, and they found a safe spot to rest. Elias set up a small shelter and prepared a modest meal, sharing some of it with Zira, who had declined to eat until now. She watched him work with careful hands, precise movements, and a calm focus. There was an artistry in his actions that fascinated her. As Zira settled beside the small fire, she realized that the day had changed something within her. For the first time, she understood that there was more to strength than muscle and skill in battle. Intelligence, creativity, and calm courage were powerful in ways she had never fully appreciated. And though she would never admit it aloud, a single thought lingered in her mind as she stared at the stars. Perhaps, just perhaps, this human, Captain Elias, was capable of challenging even the unshakable Zira. And that realization, quiet but undeniable, stirred something new within her, a sensation that she had never experienced before, something close to caution. The night passed with the sounds of distant predators echoing through the valley, yet Zira felt no fear. Instead, she felt anticipation, for she knew that this human was only the beginning of a challenge she could not yet measure, a test that would push her beyond everything she had ever known. And deep inside, she wondered, what would happen when the unshakable warrior finally faced something, or someone she could not simply overpower? The following morning, the valley lay quiet under the pale light of Virelia's twin suns. Zira woke first, as always, her senses alert to the faintest movements in the rocky terrain. She observed Elias from across the small fire, noting how methodically he packed his things and checked his surroundings. There was no hesitation, no sign of fatigue or fear. It was as if he had been born to navigate danger. Zira rose silently and stepped away from the camp. She wanted to assess the terrain, to plan potential strategies should the human prove dangerous. But as she walked along the ridge, she realized that she was not thinking like a warrior alone. She was thinking like a strategist and observer of this unusual intruder. Elias, for his part, had noticed her absence. He scanned the rocks and cliffs, his gaze sharp. "I know you're nearby," he said quietly, almost to himself. "No need to hide forever. Let's see what you can do." Zaira's lips curved slightly. He was confident, yes, but not reckless. That made him more unpredictable. And unpredictability was dangerous. By mid-morning, Zaira decided to confront him. She moved with her usual grace, descending from the ridge and stepping into the open valley. Her armor glinted in the sunlight, and the faint hum of the wind carried the sharp scent of the highlands. Elias was aware of her presence immediately, but did not flinch. Instead, he straightened, studying her movements like a chess player reading an opponent. "You continue to follow me," he said casually. "Why? You could end this with a single strike." "I do not strike without reason," Zaira replied. Her voice was calm but carried authority. "I watch because I must understand. You are unlike any opponent I have faced." Elias tilted his head. "Unlike any opponent? That is flattering. I assume you plan to test me?" Zaira nodded once, her expression unreadable. "Perhaps. You move carefully, but strength and skill will always matter. Let us see how your mind fares against mine." And so the first true encounter began, not with a fight, but with a contest of strategy. Zaira moved first, advancing slowly through the rocks, testing his reactions. Elias, anticipating her, adjusted his steps, avoiding direct confrontation while observing her patterns. Every movement, every glance was part of an unspoken conversation of skill. The valley became their arena. Zaira would shift behind rocks, appearing and disappearing like a shadow. Elias would use his small size and quick reflexes to evade, to redirect, to mislead her. He did not run in panic. He ran with purpose, leaving subtle clues, small trails meant to distract or misdirect. Zaira found herself intrigued. This human's mind worked differently from any warrior she had trained against. Hours passed in this tense dance. The sun rose high and sweat dampened Zaira's armor, yet she did not slow. She had faced countless battles, endured heat, storms, and feral beasts. Yet none of her previous opponents had forced her to think so carefully, to adapt so continuously. Elias was teaching her something, though indirectly. Finally, Zaira decided to test his limits directly. She leapt from a high rock, landing between him and a narrow canyon. The human stopped, calculating his options in an instant. Most would have panicked. Most would have tried to flee and failed. But Elias smiled faintly, then moved to a side passage she had not expected him to use. He reached higher ground, keeping the advantage without entering a direct fight. Zaira exhaled slowly. The human was clever, perhaps more clever than she had imagined. He was not relying on strength, not relying on weapons, but on anticipation, understanding, and adaptability. Every move he made required her full attention. Every step was a challenge to her unshakable confidence. "You are resourceful," Zaira admitted, her voice quiet but sharp. "I did not expect this." Elias looked at her, eyes bright with quiet amusement. "I told you. Brute force is not always the answer. The mind can win battles the body cannot." Zaira's gaze narrowed. She respected intelligence, yes, but she was a warrior. Physical strength, endurance, and skill were as much a part of her as the air she breathed. And yet, this human made her reconsider. The contest continued throughout the day. They navigated treacherous rock formations, crossed streams, and avoided hidden traps left by nature itself. Zaira noticed that Elias learned quickly, adapting to dangers that would have caught most off guard. He used simple tools creatively, creating makeshift bridges or protective barriers, showing a resourcefulness she had not seen in her people. By late afternoon, exhaustion began to touch both of them. Zaira had moved tirelessly, yet her mind was sharper than ever. She realized that Elias did not tire easily either. His stamina seemed quiet but unyielding, powered not just by body but by focus and clever planning. Then a sudden sound broke their concentration. From the far side of the valley, a group of massive predators, larger than the Rathraks with thick armored hides and glowing eyes, emerged. They had been drawn by movement and noise. Both Zaira and Elias froze, realizing the danger was immediate and deadly. Zaira moved instinctively, preparing for combat. But Elias did not panic. Instead, he scanned the terrain, noted the positions of rocks, slopes, and potential hazards. He did not draw a weapon. He calculated a strategy. Zira watched, fascinated. Most creatures would have either charged blindly or fled in panic. Elias planned. He used the rocks to create choke points, guiding the predators without fighting them directly. With a few small devices, he emitted bursts of light and sound that disoriented the creatures, directing them away from them both. For the first time, Zira saw courage in a form she had not recognized. It was quiet, intelligent, and careful, but it was undeniably effective. Elias faced mortal danger without fear, without hesitation, and yet he preserved himself and minimized risk. When the last predator fled, Zira approached him. Her expression was unreadable, but her mind was alive with new understanding. "You survive differently," she said simply. Elias nodded. "Different does not mean weaker. It means adaptable. Strength is not always in the body. It is in the mind and the choices you make." Zira's lips tightened. His words were not a challenge, yet they felt like one. She had always measured strength by skill and courage in combat. Yet this human suggested another measure, a way of facing danger that required neither dominance nor raw power. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Zira decided to test Elias one final time. She approached him, slowing her pace, speaking softly. "If we were to fight, you would lose," she said. "But perhaps I have underestimated you." Elias met her gaze without fear. "Perhaps," he said, "or perhaps you have yet to understand what humans can do." The moment was brief but intense. No blows were struck, no weapons clashed, yet a silent understanding passed between them. They were opponents, yes, but not enemies in the traditional sense. Each had tested the other, learned from the other, and found value in the contest itself. Night fell, and they made camp near a small spring. Zira remained watchful, though she felt a strange calm. Elias prepared food and water with careful precision, sharing some with her. She accepted, noting the small act of kindness and cooperation. It was not weakness, it was a demonstration of control, of intelligence, and of courage in another form. As they rested, Zira reflected on the day. She had faced countless dangers, battled endless foes, and yet none had challenged her understanding like this human. He had proven that courage and strength were not always about force. There was value in observation, in intelligence, in careful and creative action. For the first time, Zira questioned her own beliefs. She had been trained to see fear as weakness, to dismiss caution as unnecessary. But Elias had shown her that fear could be faced in many ways, and that bravery was not defined by muscle alone. A small thought entered her mind, quiet and almost unwelcome. Perhaps fear was not unknown to her after all. Perhaps it had simply taken this human to awaken her awareness of it. Elias glanced at her, sensing her thoughts without words. "You are thinking," he said softly. "That is good. Thinking is survival." Zira did not answer. She only stared at the stars above, contemplating the challenge that lay ahead. This human was clever, fearless, and unpredictable. And she, the unshakable warrior, had never faced anyone like him. The night passed quietly, yet both knew that the next day would bring new tests. The contest of minds and courage was far from over. And deep inside, Zira felt a spark, a mixture of anticipation, respect, and something she had never admitted before. Curiosity. The unshakable warrior had met the human. And for the first time, she understood that survival and strength were not always about who struck first or hardest. They were about adaptation, intelligence, and courage in forms she had never considered. And so as the twin moons of Virelia cast silver light across the valley, Zira prepared herself. The clash of minds was only beginning. The next morning, the twin suns rose over the valley, casting long shadows across the jagged cliffs and the shallow river that cut through the plains. Zira awoke first as usual, her senses alert to every sound and movement. She noticed Elias already up, examining the area near the riverbank. He moved quietly, carefully inspecting the terrain and marking small points with a device she did not recognize. Zira followed him silently, her mind sharp with observation. She did not fully understand his tools nor his methods, but she could see the logic in his actions. Every step he took, every action he performed was deliberate. It was strategy in motion, a language of survival that went beyond brute strength. "Why do you do that?" Zira asked finally, breaking the silence. Elias looked up, his expression calm. "I prepare. Survival depends on understanding the environment and anticipating challenges. You cannot control everything, but you can control how you respond. Zira nodded slowly. She had spent centuries learning to control outcomes with force, but she realized that she could not control everything, not even here on her home planet. And this human, small and seemingly fragile, had already demonstrated a new kind of power, one she had never considered. By mid-morning, the pair had moved deeper into the northern plains, approaching a series of narrow canyons known to be treacherous. Zira had crossed these paths many times before, confident in her skill and instincts. But Elias moved with a quiet precision that intrigued her. He tested the rocks, checked the stability of the slopes, and traced the paths with careful attention. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. Zira's instinct screamed danger. She leapt forward, grabbing Elias and pulling him to safety just as a small landslide crashed down where they had stood moments before. "That was close," Elias said, brushing off dust. "These canyons are unstable. We need to move carefully." Zira did not respond immediately. She was thinking, analyzing. She had faced earthquakes, storms, and enemy attacks. Yet this natural hazard reminded her that even the unshakable could be vulnerable. And yet Elias had remained calm. He had not panicked. He had anticipated, adapted, and survived. As they continued, the terrain became more difficult. Narrow ledges and steep cliffs forced them to move in single file. A sudden roar echoed through the canyon, vibrating through the rocks. Zira froze, recognizing the sound immediately. A feral worm, a massive predator with armored scales and piercing eyes, was approaching. It was faster, stronger, and more intelligent than any creature she had faced recently. Elias noticed it too. He crouched behind a boulder, quickly scanning the area for options. Zira instinctively drew her blade, ready to engage. "You do not need to fight it head-on," Elias said calmly. "There is another way." Zira frowned. "Explain." Elias pointed to a narrow crevice along the canyon wall. "Lead it into there. It cannot turn easily. I can use the terrain to trap it." Zira hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. Together they moved carefully, staying just out of reach of the feral worm. The creature followed, its massive claws scraping the stone, its glowing eyes fixed on them. Zira led the way, agile and precise, while Elias calculated each step, adjusting the path to exploit the terrain's weaknesses. When they reached the crevice, Elias acted quickly. He set a small device that emitted a pulse of energy, startling the worm and forcing it further into the narrow passage. Its size made it impossible to maneuver, and it became trapped. Zira watched in awe as the human solved a deadly problem without striking a single blow. "You did that very well," she said, her voice steady but tinged with admiration. "Most would have attacked and failed." "You think differently?" Elias smiled faintly. "Thinking is part of survival. Force alone does not always win. Sometimes observation, planning, and timing matter more." Zira studied him closely. For the first time, she saw a reflection of something she had never fully acknowledged in herself. Respect. She respected strength, yes, but she had never seen courage and intelligence combined in such a way. Elias had faced danger directly, yet he had relied on his mind as much as his body. The day continued and the challenges increased. Rocks shifted beneath their feet. Hidden pits threatened to swallow them, and strange creatures lurked nearby, watching silently. Each time Elias anticipated the dangers, guiding both of them safely through. Zira realized that his methods were not just clever, they were efficient, and they kept both alive. By evening, they reached a plateau overlooking a valley that glimmered with a faint blue light. A river wound through the landscape, and distant mountains rose like guardians on the horizon. They set up camp, though Zira noticed that Elias did not simply rest. He checked the surrounding terrain, ensured their safety, and prepared food and water. Each action was precise, purposeful, and careful. Zira accepted the meal he offered her, noting the simplicity and efficiency of his preparations. She had lived on Virelia all her life, and yet she could not deny that she had learned something from this human. He faced danger differently, thought differently, and survived differently. And that difference made him formidable in ways she had never imagined. That night, the wind carried the distant howls of predators. Yet Zira felt no fear. She reflected on the day's events, recognizing a truth she had not considered. Courage was not the absence of fear, nor was strength measured only by skill in combat. Courage could be intelligence, patience, and adaptability. Strength could be creativity, strategy, and calm under pressure. Elias noticed her contemplative mood. "You are thinking," he said quietly. "That is good. Thinking helps you survive. Sometimes the greatest warriors learn from those they do not expect." Zira's eyes met his. She remained silent, though her mind was alive with thought. The human had challenged everything she believed about strength, skill, and survival. For centuries she had known only victory through power. Now she realized that there were other forms of victory, other ways to face danger, other kinds of courage she had never considered. The next morning the test grew even more intense. A sudden storm swept across the plateau, winds tearing through the cliffs and rain pounding the rocky ground. Visibility dropped to near zero and the terrain became treacherous. Zira moved instinctively, her body strong and trained, but she found herself relying on Elias's guidance. "Stay low," he shouted over the roar of the wind. "Move carefully. The rocks shift under the rain." Zira followed, noting how Elias's calm and precise directions kept them both safe. She realized with a flicker of amazement that without him, she could have misstepped and fallen. The human, small and unarmed in comparison, had become her guide through one of the most dangerous moments of her life. By afternoon, the storm cleared, leaving the plateau slick and muddy. Zira and Elias looked out over the valley below, exhausted but unharmed. The challenges they had faced together had changed something in Zira. She had learned that even the unshakable could benefit from observation, collaboration, and careful planning. Strength was not always about winning battles alone, it was about surviving them wisely. Zira spoke softly, almost to herself. "I underestimated you, human. You have shown me that courage comes in many forms." Elias smiled. "And you have shown me that strength can be more than just survival. It can be wisdom, patience, and guidance." For a moment, the two shared a quiet understanding, a bond formed not through friendship, but through respect. They were different from different worlds with different strengths, yet they had survived together. Zira realized that the human had forced her to see beyond her own abilities, to consider a new perspective, and to recognize that courage and strength were not limited to her people alone. As night fell and the stars of Virelia twinkled above, Zira felt a strange sensation she could not name. She had never been afraid, yet she had never experienced the respect and admiration she now felt for Elias. He had faced danger without fear, using his mind and his courage in equal measure, and she, the unshakable warrior, had survived because of him. The plateau was quiet, save for the distant sound of wildlife and the gentle flow of the river below. Zira and Elias settled down, exhausted but alert. Neither spoke much, but both understood the unspoken truth. The human had proven himself not through raw power, but through intelligence, calm, and ingenuity. And Zira, for the first time, had learned that there was more to strength than she had ever imagined. And deep inside, a thought lingered, one she had never admitted to herself before. Perhaps fear was not unknown to her, but had simply been waiting for someone like Elias to awaken it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would face them with a new perspective. The human had shown her that courage could come in many forms, and that even the unshakable warrior could learn, adapt, and grow. The night passed quietly, yet the bond between them had changed. They were no longer simply observer and intruder. They were allies in survival, opponents in skill, and teachers to each other in ways neither had anticipated. The turning point had come. Zira, unshakable and fearless, had discovered something she had never known. There were beings in the universe who could challenge her mind, her courage, and her understanding of strength. And for the first time she welcomed the challenge. The morning sun cast a warm glow across the plateau, illuminating the northern plains of Virelia. Zira woke first, as always, her mind alert and her body ready for action. She glanced at Elias, who was already awake, studying the horizon with calm determination. Today, she sensed, would not be a day of observation or testing. It would be a day of action. The distant hills shimmered with a strange movement, and Zira's sharp eyes picked it up immediately. A massive sandstorm was rolling toward them, faster than any natural storm she had encountered. But it was not alone. Amid the swirling dust, silhouettes of creatures larger than any predator she had faced emerged, drawn by the winds and the chaos. They moved with frightening coordination, hunting together like a single intelligent force. Zira's hand instinctively went to her blade. She was ready to fight, to protect herself and the human who had become an unexpected ally. But she noticed something different in Elias. He did not reach for a weapon. Instead, he observed the storm, the creatures, and the terrain. He calculated, assessed, and prepared. "We need to work together," Elias said quietly. "Force alone will not help. Follow my lead." Zira's eyes narrowed. She had always relied on her strength, her instincts, and her speed. But Elias had proven time and again that intelligence and strategy could match and even surpass raw power. She nodded once, acknowledging the truth in his words. Together, they moved toward a narrow canyon that twisted through the cliffs. Zira led the way with her agility, clearing the path and scanning for immediate dangers. Elias followed, using small devices to mark safe paths, detect unstable rocks, and divert smaller predators away from their route. Their movements were in perfect synchronization, a combination of muscle and mind, instinct and strategy. The storm hit before they could reach the canyon. Sand and dust whipped around them, cutting visibility to almost nothing. Zira's instincts kept her balanced on the uneven rocks, while Elias used the terrain to guide both of them through the chaos. They climbed, jumped, and ducked as rocks tumbled and creatures lunged from the storm. Each challenge required quick thinking and precise action. At one point, a massive creature lunged from the swirling sand directly toward Zira. She reacted instantly, deflecting its strike with her blade. But Elias was already moving, placing a device on a nearby rock that emitted a burst of energy, startling the creature and forcing it away. Zira realized then that they had become more than allies. They were a team, their strengths complementing each other in ways neither had anticipated. Hours passed, and the storm showed no sign of slowing. The creatures pressed on, relentless and coordinated. Zira and Elias moved through the canyon, navigating tight passages and precarious ledges. They faced obstacles that would have overwhelmed most beings, yet together they survived. Zira relied on her physical skill and instincts, while Elias relied on his intelligence, planning, and calm courage. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the storm's haze, they reached a narrow ridge overlooking the heart of the plains. From here they could see the full scale of the chaos. The sandstorm was massive, and the creatures were spreading across the land, threatening everything in their path. "We can stop this," Elias said quietly, "but we need to act carefully. The terrain can be used to our advantage. Lead them into the gorge." Zira studied the ridge and the gorge below. She understood immediately. The gorge was narrow, with steep sides and jagged rocks, perfect for trapping the creatures. She adjusted her stance, ready to guide the predators into the trap. Elias moved beside her, placing devices strategically to funnel the creatures toward the gorge and to block any escape. The plan was risky. If they failed, both could be crushed or killed. But Zira did not hesitate. She had learned from Elias that survival required more than strength. It required collaboration, intelligence, and courage in new forms. She signaled him, and together, they began to lure the creatures toward the gorge. The first predators fell into the trap, sliding and tumbling into the narrow canyon below. The gorge amplified their movements, trapping them and preventing escape. Elias's devices pulsed with energy, disorienting the creatures and preventing them from climbing out. Zira moved with precision, guiding more predators into the gorge while avoiding danger herself. The storm intensified, but their coordination never faltered. Zira's physical prowess and combat instincts complemented Elias's strategy and clever use of the environment. One by one, the creatures were trapped or neutralized, unable to overcome the combined force of strength and intelligence. Finally, after hours of relentless effort, the last predator was contained. The sandstorm began to subside, the winds dying down, leaving the plains eerily quiet. Zira and Elias stood together on the ridge, breathing heavily, covered in dust and mud, yet alive. They had survived the storm and the predators, not through individual skill alone, but through collaboration and mutual trust. Zira turned to Elias, her expression unreadable at first, then softening slightly. "You were impressive," she said. "I did not believe a human could survive like this on Virelia, let alone help me survive." "You have proven yourself." Elias smiled, though he was equally exhausted. "And you have proven something to me as well," he replied. "Strength alone is not enough. Courage and intelligence combined can overcome challenges no one can face alone. Zira considered his words. For centuries, she had relied on her physical skill, her unshakable courage, and her instinctive mastery of the land. But Elias had shown her a new perspective, that intelligence, observation, and careful planning could amplify even the greatest strength. She realized that her previous victories had been limited by her understanding. With this human beside her, they had accomplished what neither could have done alone. As the sun set fully, casting a warm golden glow across the plains, Zira allowed herself to relax for the first time in days. She had faced countless dangers, yet this was different. This was not about defeating enemies or surviving storms alone. This was about learning, adapting, and growing through collaboration. Elias prepared a small fire, and they sat together, sharing the few supplies they had. There was no need for conversation. Silence was enough, filled with mutual understanding and respect. Zira realized that she had found something unexpected in this human. Not only courage, intelligence, and skill, but also the ability to teach her about herself and the world in ways she had never imagined. "You have changed me," Zira said quietly, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "I had never known fear, yet I feel it differently now. Not as weakness, but as awareness, and I respect your courage," Elias nodded. "And you have changed me as well. I have faced challenges before, but none as intense or as enlightening as what I have learned with you. Strength and courage come in many forms, and survival depends on recognizing them." The night passed peacefully, the stars of Virilia twinkling above. Zira and Elias rested, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also knowing that together they could face anything. The unshakable warrior and the courageous human had formed an unlikely alliance, one that would redefine their understanding of strength, courage, and survival. By morning, the valley was calm once again. The storm had passed, the predators had been contained, and the plains were safe. Zira and Elias stood on the ridge looking out over the land they had conquered, not with weapons alone, but with strategy, intelligence, and mutual respect. Zira placed a hand on her blade, then relaxed it. "I have learned something valuable," she said. "Strength alone is not everything. Courage can take many forms, and even the unshakable can grow stronger by learning from others." Elias smiled. "And I have learned that bravery is not only in facing danger, but in trusting someone else and combining your strengths. Together we can survive anything." For the first time, Zira allowed herself a small smile. She had met the human, faced challenges that tested her body and mind, and discovered a new understanding of courage and strength. Fear, she realized, was not something to be avoided. It was something to be understood, faced, and even respected. The unshakable warrior of Virelia had met a human unlike any other. And in the process, she had learned that courage, intelligence, and respect could create alliances stronger than any weapon. As they descended from the ridge, moving toward the distant mountains and the unknown challenges that awaited, Zira knew that this journey had changed her forever. She had discovered that fear was not unknown, but that courage could take many forms, and that sometimes the greatest strength lay in partnership, understanding, and trust. And so, the unshakable warrior walked beside the human, not as a guide, not as an observer, but as an equal. Together they faced the future, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever challenges the universe might send their way. The adventure had ended, but the lessons would last forever. Zilara moved like a shadow over the jagged cliffs of Talcora, her dark armor reflecting the faint light of the twin suns overhead. Every step she took was precise, deliberate, as if the very air obeyed her. She had patrolled this region countless times before, yet it never felt routine. The wilderness of Talcora was alive, a place where creatures of unimaginable size and ferocity roamed freely. Most aliens would not dare to tread here. But Zylora? She feared nothing. Not the razor-toothed Ralki that hunted in packs. Not the soaring skyrens that circled the skies like living missiles. And certainly not the whispering shadows that slithered between the crystalline cliffs. The Aelorian people often spoke of her with awe, even reverence. Zylora was a warrior unlike any other, capable of facing dangers that would make entire squads tremble. Her courage had earned her the title of Guardian of Talcora, a name she bore with pride but never arrogance. To her, fear was simply a weakness to be dismissed. She had trained for decades, honing her mind and body until both were weapons as sharp as the crystalline blades she carried. Today, the wind was harsher than usual. Talcora's cliffs were jagged, with paths that could easily break a careless step. Yet Zalara walked with ease. Her eyes scanned the horizon, sharp and calculating. She was alone, as she often preferred, because companions slowed her. Her senses were attuned to every sound, every movement. A rustle in the wind, a glint of light across the rocks, nothing escaped her notice. Her mission was simple: patrol the outer cliffs, ensure no creatures crossed into the lower valleys where the city floated above the clouds. The Aelorian city was a marvel of technology and elegance, built of transparent materials that shimmered like ice in sunlight. From above it looked serene, almost untouchable, but Zalara knew better. Nature respected no city. Danger came for everyone, even in places humans might call safe. As she leapt across a chasm with the grace of a predator, a shiver ran down her spine, not from fear, but from excitement. There were stories circulating among the Aelorians about a new presence in orbit, a visitor unlike anything they had ever seen. Zalara dismissed them at first. Alien species often ventured near Talcora, but none had ever posed a real threat. Her kind had survived countless dangers across centuries. A lone visitor could not change that. Still, curiosity lingered. Zalara paused on the edge of the cliff, looking up at the sky. The twin suns cast long shadows, making the cliffs appear taller, sharper. And there, cutting through the blue haze of the upper atmosphere, was a glint, a small craft, unlike any she had studied in her training. Its shape was unfamiliar, simple, almost fragile, yet it moved with a confidence that no fragile ship should possess. Zalara narrowed her eyes. Most aliens relied on large, complex vessels bristling with weapons, shields, and energy cores. This craft had none of those features, yet it maneuvered as if it belonged to the sky itself. She had faced creatures capable of breaking steel in seconds, yet this single small craft stirred a strange curiosity in her. A challenge, perhaps, though she would never admit it aloud. The sun's light reflected off the craft, sending a streak of brilliance across the cliffs. Zalara's claws dug into the rock as she crouched low, her mind racing. She had learned to trust her instincts over her eyes. Something about this presence was different. It was not hostile, at least not yet, but it carried a weight she could not ignore. Curious, she whispered to herself, her voice low but firm. Not dangerous. Yet, her attention returned to the cliffs, scanning for any movement. The forests below were silent, almost eerily so. Normally the Ralki would howl in the distance and the Skyrans would glide overhead, their sharp cries echoing off the cliffs. Today there was nothing. A part of her wondered if the creatures themselves had sensed the visitor, if instinct had warned them of something unfamiliar. Zalara pushed the thought aside. She did not fear the unknown. That was the essence of being a guardian. Fear was a tool for the weak. The strong learned to act despite it. And she, Zalara, was as strong as any warrior the Aelorians had ever seen. Her journey continued, each step taking her closer to the edge of the cliffs where the forests of Talcora began. The vegetation there was dense, filled with towering fungi that glowed faintly in the dim light, and creeping vines that could strangle even the largest predators if one were careless. Zalara moved effortlessly, avoiding traps that had been set by nature itself over centuries. She knew these lands better than anyone, yet she remained vigilant. A sudden movement caught her eye, a flash of silver in the corner of her vision. Instinctively, she leapt to the side as a massive Ralki lunged from the shadows. Its jaws snapped shut where she had just stood. Zalara rolled and sprang to her feet, her blades drawn. The Ralki snarled, its eyes glowing a fierce amber, but she was already gone, blending into the shadows. A phantom among the rocks. Moments later, she stood on a high ledge, observing the beast retreat. It would live to hunt another day, but it would remember the guardian. Zalara's chest rose and fell slowly. She was exhilarated, not frightened. This was her life. Facing danger, surviving, thriving where others would fall. And yet, even as she celebrated her victory, the memory of the small craft lingered in her mind. Why had it appeared here of all places? Why now? Zalara had survived countless threats, from predator swarms to territorial skirmishes. Yet a single unknown presence in orbit unsettled her in a way she could not define. Her communicator buzzed softly, breaking her thoughts. She activated it. "Guardian Zalara," a familiar voice said, tinged with both concern and excitement. "Reports from the observatory. The visitor. It has landed." Zalara's eyes narrowed. The human, or whatever species this visitor was, had chosen to descend to the planet itself. Bold, reckless, or perhaps clever. She did not yet know which, but she intended to find out. "I will investigate," she replied. Her voice was steady, confident, betraying none of the curiosity or slight unease she felt. "Prepare the city defenses, but do not engage. I want to see this visitor for myself." The wind carried her words into the cliffs as she leapt from her perch, moving toward the landing site with the precision of a predator on the hunt. She descended into the thick forest, her mind alert to every sound, every flicker of movement. The forest was alive with creatures, but none dared challenge her. They recognized her, or perhaps they simply feared what they could not understand. As she neared the landing site, the air grew warmer, tinged with an unfamiliar scent, metal mixed with something she could not identify. Zylara paused, crouching low among the glowing fungi. She could see the faint outline of the craft through the trees. Small, compact, and clearly designed for one being, it exuded a quiet confidence as if it belonged here more than anyone else. Her claws dug into the earth as she approached silently. The hatch opened and a figure stepped out. Unlike the towering aliens of Talcora, this being was smaller, fragile in appearance, yet there was an unmistakable presence about it. It moved with purpose, scanning the surroundings with sharp, intelligent eyes. Zylara felt something she had never felt before, a ripple of uncertainty, a spark of apprehension. She had faced many powerful beings in her life, but this human carried a strange aura, calm, determined, fearless, not reckless, not aggressive, but ready. She crouched behind a thick vine, watching as the human adjusted the small pack on its back, its movements fluid and precise. The human's gaze swept the forest, taking in every detail, calculating, planning, yet somehow, serene, Zylara whispered to herself, barely audible over the wind. "Fear. I do not know it. But this," she paused, her mind racing. "This is different." And for the first time in her long life as the guardian of Talcora, Zylara felt a flicker of something new, an unfamiliar awareness that perhaps, just perhaps, not all threats were visible. Not all dangers could be faced with strength alone. The human looked up, directly in her direction, and for a brief moment their eyes met. Zylara froze, a strange chill running down her spine. The human's gaze was steady, unyielding, yet not hostile. It was the gaze of someone who had faced the unknown before and chosen to master it, not fear it. Zylara's claws tightened around her blades. She had faced countless dangers, yet she realized in that moment that this being was unlike any she had ever encountered, and though she would never admit it aloud, the guardian of Talcora had just discovered something new. There existed a courage that even she had never seen before, and it terrified her.